Alright, so you've got your layers all split. What we're going to do now is a few close-up scenes of some of the pictures we've got here. Before we do that, we need to remove these keyframes from the adjustment layer. I forgot to remove these keyframes after we copied the effect onto the adjustment layer, and you can see after the keyframe here that the adjustment just becomes a bit too intense. So make sure your time indicator is before those two keyframes, then select them and delete them. If you were to delete them with your time indicator after the last keyframe, you would be continuing with that last value. And since we don't need these photo frames open anymore, we can close those. So I'm in photo frame 9 and I'm going to press Command W, Command W, Command W, and let's just close all of these for now. Let's close the Asset Comps folder and open the Render Comps folder and see Rain Scene. Let's duplicate that. And we'll rename it Close-Up 1. Let's double click Close-Up 1 to enter the composition. And let's choose a picture that we want to zoom into. I'm going to choose photo frame 9. What we're going to have to do here is trim the composition down slightly. So with photo frame 9 selected, press I to go to the in point of that layer. Drag the work area start to the beginning of photo frame 9. Right click this top little grey area here and let's say trim comp to work area. So now our new duration has been shortened and the scene starts with our pictures already in the water. Okay, and another change we need to do here is change the start time of our composition. So come up to composition and go to composition settings. Let's change the time start code to 0. We also don't need the first instances of our photos falling through the air. So you can hold shift and select photo frame 1 and then select photo frame 9 and just press delete to delete all of those. So with the camera layer selected, I'm going to create a new null object. Go to layer, new, null object. I'm going to change the color of those layers, so I'm going to make them green so that they stand out a bit better. Make the null object a 3D layer. We'll also change its name, so with a null object selected, press enter, and I'm going to type in cam null. Select the camera and use the pick whip tool to parent the camera to the null. So I'm selecting photo frame 9 so I can see exactly where I'm going to be zooming into. So I'm going back to the cam null, I'm going to press P, and then I'm going to drag on the Z property to zoom in. I'm going to zoom in really close here, maybe just a little bit further out. Ideally I want to have some of these other pictures in the shot. With our shot framed up quite nicely, we're going to add keyframes for position and Z rotation. So make sure you've got your time indicator at the beginning of the composition and just set keyframes again for position and Z rotation. With the layer still selected, press U and press U again just to reveal those keyframes only. So I think our movement only needs to be around 6 seconds. We might not use all of those 6 seconds when we're actually cutting this together, but let's just put them in there for now. With my current time indicator at 6 seconds, I'm going to add some Z rotation by pressing the up arrow key here. I'm also going to move my null around slightly just to give it a bit of a slight drift. Another thing we're going to do here is hop into photo frame 9, and with the text layer selected we can adjust the roughen edges effect, and this way we're going to be able to make our ink smudge and run. Let's go back into the close-up 1 comp to make sure we're at the right time. So we don't want to start smudging before we're at the right moment in our composition here, because if we start a bit too earlier on in photo frame 9, the ink is going to start smudging before we even get a chance to see it. So you just need to be aware that when you apply and adjust effects in pre-comps, that you're doing it at the exact right time. This is because this is the same instance being used in two different compositions. With our text layer selected and the roughen edges effect visible, add a keyframe to border and then press U to reveal the keyframe in the layer. Let's move along around 20 frames, so I'm holding Shift and pressing page down twice. 10, 20. And let's start increasing the border there. Let's go back into our close-up and have a look at what we've just done. I think we can make this ink running effect last a bit longer. So let's go back into photo frame 9. We originally had 20 frames, so that's not even a second. Let's make this last 2 seconds. So let's just jump to 5 seconds and then drag this keyframe along. You know what, let's just make it 3 seconds. Let's go to 6 seconds here and drag that keyframe up. Okay, that should look pretty cool in our main close-up composition. And let's set our resolution to half. Yeah, you can see that our text is starting to gradually bleed out there, and I do think that looks pretty cool. And that's one of our close-ups done. Let's go back to our project panel, select the rain scene again, and then let's duplicate that scene one more time. Let's call this copy Close-Up 2. So double click to enter Close-Up 2. We'll repeat this process again, and then we'll make a few duplicates before we zoom in and add our null object. So if you remember, we selected the ground texture and our edge blur, so our topmost layer and our bottommost layer. We held Alt and open square bracket to trim those layers. Drag the work area start to the beginning of those layers, hover over the grey area, right click and trim comp to work area. We then delete the green copies of the photo frames because we won't need those anymore. Then select the camera and go to Layer, New, Null Object. And again, let's change those to a different color. I still prefer green, and this is going to be called Cam Null. Then let's parent our camera to the null object. You're seeing this error here because I've got caps lock on, so I'm just going to turn caps lock off. Make sure your camera null is 3D as well. Alright, now that everything's ready, we should start making multiple copies of this composition. So let's start by making sure that the start time of our composition is 0. So go to the composition settings with Command K and change that back to 0. Then let's go up to the project panel and make a few more copies. I think 5 should do us fine. Okay, so I'm just going to close photo frame 9 because I don't need that right now. And jump inside Close-Up 2. And then let's move our camera into photo frame 4, which is this one over here. So hit P for position and start zooming in. And I'm going to start moving over. So my photo frame 4 is the one with our suspects. I'm just going to check in a high resolution to make sure that word is still legible. Go into photo frame 4 though and select the text layer. I'm just going to reduce the border to 2 just so that it's a little bit more clearer what that word says in our main comp. I'm going to add a keyframe here now because I think this is going to be roughly where our text starts to smudge. We can adjust the timing for this keyframe once we've animated our camera. So let's head back into close-up 2. So select the null, and as you can see, we've already got position selected, so hit Shift and R. Add a keyframe for Z rotation and another one for position. Then press U just to reveal the keyframes. And again, let's go for 6 seconds. So I'm going to add a bit of zoom here and also move my camera so that the picture's moving upwards in the screen. And also I'm going to add a little bit more Z rotation. It doesn't have to be in all of them. I just think having this extra kind of movement just makes it all look a bit more interesting, really. At this point, feel free to add the movements that you think look best. So I think at around 1 second in this composition is when we want to start seeing the text start to smudge off. So let's jump back into photo frame 4. So with the text layer already selected, press U to reveal the keyframe which we set earlier. Well, it's not quite in the right position, so let's drag that over to where the current time indicator is. So I want this to happen over at least 3 seconds. So I'm going to go to 9 seconds in this picture comp. Then I'm going to drag this border up until the text starts to disappear and really become distorted. And then let's have a look at that. Yeah, you can see it's not happening too fast. If it was too fast, it would probably look a little bit strange and not so natural. So let's jump back in our close-up 2 and have a look at what that looks like. Yeah, as you can see, it's starting to look like the ink is washing away, and I think that's the timing for that is fine. So I'm going to do close-up 3, and then I'll pause it and allow you guys to do the other 2, and then we'll come back and put all these scenes together. So let's jump into close-up comp 3. So as you remember, I'm sure, we already made our null object and trimmed our layers here. So let's select another picture. One thing to keep in mind when you're selecting the picture that you want to zoom in on is to understand how this is all going to be put together. We're going to be cutting from close-up 1 to close-up 2 and so on. So you don't really want to see a picture in the next composition that you just previously saw in the other one. So try to choose one which is a bit further away. So that's why I'm going to choose photo frame 6, this one at the top here. So select the null, P for position, and start zooming in. I'm going to position this picture over to the right a bit more and zoom in a little bit. And I'm also going to allow this empty space on the left here. So again, I'm going to add position and Z rotation keyframes. With those keyframes added, press U and U again, just so that we see those keyframes only. Okay, so move your time indicator now to 6 seconds. So I'm going to zoom in quite a bit and add some more Z rotation. It kind of makes it look like it's drifting on the water, which is quite a good effect actually. I'm going to move this over a bit more so the picture's a bit more in our scene as well actually. I think that looks good. Alright, so let's start making the ink smudge away at around 1 second again. So let's jump into photo frame 6. As you can see, inside that composition we're at the exact time point we want to be. So again, let's select our text layer and adjust the keyframe for the border. So let's activate a border keyframe. So let's move again about 3 seconds. Around here should be fine. And let's start bringing up that smudge. So if you were using this technique in another title sequence, you could put actors' names in here. But we're going to be bringing in our actors' names in their own text compositions, which we'll be using our bleed transitions to bring on. So let's jump back into our close-up 3 and have a look what we just made. There we go. Yeah, I think that's okay. So I'm going to pause this now and let you guys do the remaining scenes. We're almost finished, so I'll see you in the next parts.